We've just heard from Ersilia and Tim about the business value of cloud-native 5G readiness and the partnership between Nokia and Google Cloud. Now we're going to learn more about the architectural and deployment best practices. But before I introduce our panelists, a quick reminder that we'll be taking your questions at the end of our discussion in about 45 minutes time. So if you have any questions for our guests on this topic, then please send them in now using the form on the website. Okay, well, let's now meet our panelists. And joining us live on the program today are Margarida Correia, who is Head of Network Cloud for Google Cloud, Atul Purohit, who is Head of Technology, Cloud and Network GBC Europe for Nokia, George Glass, Chief Technology Officer for the TM Forum, Luc Brunstiels, VP of Engineering for Telenet, Neil McRae, Managing Director, Architecture and Technology Strategy and Chief Architect for BT, and Jochen Bockfeld, who is Director Common Services for Telefonica Germany. Hello everyone, very good to see you all. Well, let's start off by looking at cloud infrastructure and the cloud-native 5G core. Nokia's already executed several proofs of concepts with Google Cloud in response to CSPs wanting diversification and the hosting of elements of the 5G core in the cloud. Luke, let me turn to you first. Telenet is deploying Nokia 5G core on Google Cloud. Can you tell us why you need cloud-native networks and why you selected Nokia and Google Cloud?
As you know, in mobile and telco, there is never a dull moment. And so we're in the middle of a wave of technology innovation. On the one hand, I think everybody knows 5G starting for consumer, but there's a great use cases to come. But on the infrastructure side, we really had an important last year and a pivotal year as well. It's NFVI for the people that still remember that next level. And it's you see that they're the managed cloud providers are stepped up their game, what is possible in their public cloud, but also what is possible in our own data centers. And for Telnet, it came all together. And so we believe on the one hand, of course, on 5G and the power of 5G standalone, but we also have a very knowledgeable cloud and infra team, and we want to keep that for a long time. But we believe that we have to partner with hyperscalers to be successful in the long run. And there, the timing is really important. So on the one hand, we're introducing a new core for 5G standalone. So it's or non-standalone is not dependent on that, but it's still early days and with many questions open. Of course, we know that 5G is one of the most difficult use case we have, but we believe in it, that is the way to go. We don't know exactly what is the full business potential that we can have it, and also what is the ideal operating model. But I'm sure together with our partners, many of the partners here, we can really solve it. And if you look to the selection, it was really a diligent exercise. It took nearly a year last year. And we had a lot of new technical insights during the process. But we want that everybody can really concentrate on their strengths, on their core, what they're good at. And so we look to what is the ideal match on all those aspects, and to really see how can we find the ideal partnership that is a win-win-win for everybody. And that's where we're here now together with Google and Nokia to make that happen.
Thank you, Luke. That's very interesting. Let's look at what Telefonica is doing in Germany. Jochen, why have you adopted cloud-native networks? And no, why are you partnering with Nokia and Google Cloud?
Yeah, it's a great question. And let's maybe take a step back before answering the question and look from a broader perspective. We as a telecommunication industry are at the breaking point at the moment. We have launched the last decades 2G network, 3G, 4G networks, always the promise of delivering more customer experience, better value for the customer. But now with 5G, it's the first time that we really have a differentiator to what we are doing, and a differentiator to the competitive technologies out there in the market, connecting things, connecting industries, and also devices. And from that perspective, and Luke also mentioned it in his speech before, 5G is seen as the big step forward. And when we are thinking about how can we move, how can we leverage all the technology capabilities out there in the market, we by nature come also to the point that cloud will play a key important role on our journey of implementing 5G and then later on leveraging. And let me put a bit of focus on why do we do that and why cloud will be an enabler for this. When we look at 5G could be seen as just another technology, but it's more. It's more because it provides by standard already the interfaces, the open interfaces to integrate with parties. It by standard defines that we are able to provide low latency services serving industry and customer needs that we have heard in the last years. And cloud will play an important role because the service providers today, so all the industry partners or all the consumer service providers, they are already implementing their solutions on cloud technologies. And it's then quite natural to say, listen, we from an operator perspective, beside other arguments of moving to cloud, I will touch this in a minute, should also move in this direction in order to be on the same ecosystem. And by that being really close in order to integrate connectivity and services and going beyond just offering connectivity from a CSP perspective. So this will be a key important role. And that's what is driving at Telefonica our strategy to really look what is more in 5G and how can we leverage. For sure, cloud will be also an enabler for us in order to be more flexible, to be faster. I think we have seen and listened to a lot of speeches explaining the advantages. We in Telefonica for sure also believe in that. And we see in the proof of concepts in the early implementations we are doing right now that there's really a gain in speed, a gain in flexibility if we move to cloud technologies. We partner with Google and Nokia in this end because both are known partners to us. Nokia more from the traditional network operator perspective, but Google is one of our strategic partners when it comes to cloud solutions. And therefore, it was very close to say, okay, let's work with both of them in order to pilot and to move forward in implementing our core network, our 5G core network on top of cloud solutions, and with that being able and open to integrate with other partners.
Thank you, Jochen. George, we've just heard from two CSPs on how they're moving forward in their own networks. What is the TM Forum hearing from other CSPs on the issues around cloud native adoption, and especially as it relates to 5G core?
Yeah, that's a great question, Guy. One of the things that we're seeing is amongst our CSP members, they've already been adopting cloud native technology for their IT workloads. So increasingly, they're becoming familiar with partnering with and working with the hyperscale cloud providers. On the network side, they've been developing their own edge technology. But increasingly, what we're actually seeing is partnerships being formed there. And it's interesting that most of the operators seem to be working with a sort of multi-cloud type scenario. So they're not betting the ranch on one hyperscale provider. They're working at least two of the hyperscale providers, and they're using them in different aspects of their technology solutions. From our perspective in the TM Forum, as we've seen cloud technology rolling out, I liken it to a sort of cloud continuum. So I've got my hyperscale cloud at the core, I've got cloud at the edge, and then I eventually have cloud at the device as well. And it's really trying to work out where does the software workloads need to be deployed to actually deliver the most effective customer experience and deliver the maximum efficiency. And as the network becomes software, then actually the very same principles that we saw being applied to the IT functions are now being applied to the network functions. And the operators are moving the workloads for proximity reasons to the customer, for latency reasons, and also to reduce congestion in the core network. So they're actually moving the workloads to the edge cloud. So we're actually seeing the technology providing the solutions to some of the business problems that the operators are grasping.
Thanks for those insights, George. Atul, can I turn to you about the question of reliability? Does Nokia on Google Cloud meet the standards for so-called telco grade?
Thanks, Guy. It's a really important question, and myself coming from CSP side into the vendor landscape, now I know for a fact that being carrier grade is not just a term that we want to use as part of the RFQs, right? To shortlist the vendors, for example. But what happens basically is that there are back-to-back SLAs that the CSPs have with their customers, and hence it's important to look at carrier grade as a very key feature of the application that they want to deploy as part of their core. Now, if you look at the technical definition of the carrier grade, anything upwards of 5 nines is what we usually refer to as carrier grade. But carrier grade itself is not just a function of a single software or a system. It's actually a multi-tier problem, right? So it's the application which needs to cater to 5 nines, the underlying infrastructure that also needs to cater to 5 nines, and the network connectivities which is required to deliver the services of the future also require 5 nines. And hence, this is certainly something which is on the radar of Nokia. And what we have done is, so far we've looked at the functional and the integration and the operational onboarding of our core on Google Cloud platform. And we've kind of devised a number of scenarios as part of our day 1, day 2, day 3 strategy. And this is something, the carrier grade reliability is definitely on the cards as we go along in this journey.
Thanks, Othel. Margarita, there's so many factors here to consider. Availability, resilience, latency. We just touched on security as well. There's a lot to consider. So, can you explain a little more about how you address these to the standards that are required by the CSPs?
Sure. So, in Google, we are partnering with the CSPs to support their network transformation, and we're bringing the know-how and experience of what is being used in-house. Google already delivers services to billions of people, and these applications like YouTube, search, maps, they live in Google Cloud. So these are real cases where we provide high availability and very high scale using Google Cloud and the Google networks. Now, for CSPs and 5G networks, the foundation of our offering is based on Anthos. And Anthos allows for creating hybrid cloud environments where some of the network functions can be deployed on Anthos on-prem and directly on bare metal, which allows to achieve very low latency, which is required for some of the 5G components. And the other thing is that the modularity and containerization of the 5G components allows for CSPs to deploy those depending on the requirements of each of these components. So by creating a hybrid and multi-cloud deployment where the network functions can be deployed, Google brings the components that are already being used in Google Cloud to CSPs in terms of availability and also security mechanisms.
Well, let's move on now and talk about operations and management in multi-cloud environments. And Margarita, I want to continue with you. You've already talked a little about Anthos there. So how does your Anthos for Telecom solution help to support multiple clouds, including Edge?
Right. So, as I said, Anthos creates a platform that allows for workloads to be deployed in Google Cloud, on-prem, and also on other public clouds. And it brings automation for configuration management of the platform itself, connectivity and policy management for the workloads that are deployed on the platform, and allows for easy lifecycle management of these applications, no matter where they are deployed. Also, Anthos is a truly open platform. It's based on open source components like Kubernetes and brings rich APIs, so that allows CSPs to create an open ecosystem, bring the best into their ecosystem for the 5G networks, and avoid lock-in situations. And the other thing is Anthos can be run on big public clouds as well as on-prem, and it can also be extended to be deployed in quite small footprints, which is important for the distributed architecture that 5G or Open RAN requires, for example, for the distributed units. So with the Anthos, you get a seamless cloud platform that can be deployed in many locations, but can be centralized with the management, observability, and the security policies.
Thank you, Margarita. Atul, can you talk to us about the importance of orchestration and how you can help CSPs to support new future services?
Certainly, this is a really important topic because one of the things that 5G enables is obviously to support a number of services or number of IoT end devices, right? Now, if you look at the definition of the services of the future, so if you look at what's happening right now, I mean, right now, if you look at all the services, almost everything which is delivered to the end customer is within the CSP's control, right? All the domains through which the service, for example, flows through to the customer, it's within all the different domains that are completely managed by the CSPs. But with 5G opening up, to creation of these newer services, different services, the services of the future will actually flow through a number of different domains, some within the control of CSP and the others probably not in the control of CSPs. Now, to give you an example, if you look at a service which, for example, from an end user perspective starts from an IoT end device, now the service probably starts from there. It then flows through via the CSP network into let's say software which is being delivered as a SaaS offering. From there, probably the service thread goes via the underlying platform and the infrastructure. Maybe then it dips into the Google Maps to get some aspects of that. Maybe all this while it uses Twilio APIs, for example, to send some kind of notifications to the user, and then it goes back via the CSP network, to show some kind of view to the end customer. So the services of the future will actually span across the domains which are in CSP's control and which are not in CSP's control. And if you are to orchestrate these services where the services are dipping in and out of a cloud-based architecture, we can certainly tap into Enthos, for example, managing the cloud aspects of it. But then we definitely need an end-to-end orchestration and automation platform which can actually not just leverage the bits and pieces of the service which are dipping in and out of the cloud, but also through the network of the CSP, through partner ecosystem, through the end users, for example. So this is something that in Nokia, we are working quite aggressively with this strategy, which we are calling as Network Plus as a service. And this is where I believe the orchestration for the services of the future becomes really, really important.
Thanks, Atul. George, this is an area that the TM Forum obviously takes a keen interest in. What are your observations on the management in multi-cloud environments?
Well, that's a great question, Guy, because what we're actually seeing, unfortunately for the management in multi-cloud environments, is an awful lot of the complexity is still being pushed up into the telco domain. And that's one of the things that we're working as an industry association with the operators and with the vendors to try and address as we're developing cloud native networks. It's absolutely fine, and everybody is now accepting that these components of the network can run on a virtualized infrastructure. So the southbound interface, if you like, of those components can be normalized and standardized, and I can manage that across a multi-cloud environment. Unfortunately, the northbound interface, which allows you to configure, to activate, to manage, and to report on those components, so to actually join up that end-to-end service journey that Atul was talking about, is still vendor specific and still leaves the majority of the complexity with the telco. We need to drive standardization into the management and the operations of the network, standardize those interfaces, those northbound interfaces from the network domain into what was typically the OSS of the IT domain, and actually start to get network as a service and a number of other industry standard open APIs developed to simplify the management of tomorrow's cloud native network components. If we don't do that, the operators will be left with the complexity of managing multiple network components from a myriad of network vendors running on a multi-cloud environment. So they will still end up carrying the majority of the cost for actually delivering the service to the end customer.
Oh, that's an interesting observation, George. And in fact, a good time to remind our viewers that if anybody has any questions that they think of based on the first 20 minutes or so of our discussion, then please submit them in, get them into the program, and we'll try and answer them at the end of the show. Well, let's just move on, because George was talking about OSS there. It's a good point to move on. Margarita, I'd like to turn now to automation, analytics, and next generation OSS, BSS. So Margarita, how do CSPs best leverage analytics? What is being done now to evolve the analytics and assurance path?
Yeah, So in Google, our network and our cloud already run with a very high level of automation. And we use data analytics to manage and optimize the whole infrastructure. So what we are doing is we're working with the CSPs to bring this know-how and some of the tooling to the CSPs operation environments. And on the other part is like creating rich observability tools. Because if we get real time data to data analytics tools, we can create feedback mechanisms that then allow for configuration tools to automatically change and heal, scale, and create some optimization for the platform and also the network functions deployed on the platform. In terms of OSS, BSS, and orchestration space, we are working with partners so that they bring their offerings and they interoperate with Antus. So that the idea is that the CSPs can create new services in an agile manner and making sure that they have an end-to-end service perspective to be able to deploy and manage these new services.
Thanks, Margarita. Well, let's bring Neil into the conversation now. Neil, can you share with us what BT Group is doing around one particular aspect here? And it's a very important one, anomaly detection.
Yeah, Guy, super important if you think about it. And I remember talking to a friend of mine who used to work at Yahoo in their early days, where it could take them weeks to find a problem on a server if it was a virtualized server where they had thousands of servers and thousands of VMs. And clearly, in telecoms, we have people that depend upon the network, and any issues or anomalies we need to find instantly. And I think the approach, and you've seen me speak many times about automation and the future demands of the network. And this is where anomaly detection is crucial. An AI-based or machine learning-based anomaly detection is kind of the direction I think everybody will have to go in. We humans are limited by what we can see and what we can touch. And in a virtualized platform or cloud native platform and moving towards serverless in the future, it's going to get harder and harder to use the traditional methods of network management. So we're very much pushing on the journey, working with a few players, including Google, on this to look at anomaly detection and to look at how we build that in from the ground up rather than try and bolt it on afterwards in both our own private cloud, BT Network Cloud, but also where we're using hyperscalers and in particular where we're working with Google on Anthos.
Thanks, Neil. Looking forward to seeing the results as that work continues. Well, we started our discussion by focusing on the cloud-native 5G core, but let's move on now and look at distributed architectures for the edge and how we can enable end-user services, because we're not simply talking about technology for technology's sake here. There's business logic, there's reasons why the industry is undergoing this transformation. George, what is needed? How can CSPs leverage the strengths of the hyperscalers to create edge services for use cases that span a wide range, everything from industrial applications to consumer video and gaming?
Yeah, those are exactly the sorts of scenarios that we're seeing through our Catalyst program in the TM Forum, a rapid proof of concept competition that we run twice a year, where our members come together to actually demonstrate some of those capabilities. Edge technology and edge computing has been very popular over the last year and a half, and we're seeing everything that's being done on the edge is either to get leverage proximity to the end user, to leverage the latency of that proximity so that the round trip journey time is significantly shorter, or just to actually manage the dynamic workloads so that they can be moved from the core to the edge where they are used and then move back to the core when they're not required. Obviously, whenever you've got a cloud environment at the edge, it doesn't have the same capacity as the core. It'll have less computing power, less storage. But the key thing is that proximity to the end user. And there are many, many use cases, particularly around media, where we're seeing then the use of the edge and the physical capabilities of the edge are actually being exploited for the benefit of the customer utilizing that technology to deliver new services that wouldn't have been possible 2 or 3 years ago. 5G is a great example because of the low latency of the 5G network, then actually being able to manage the access, being able to slice the access and actually divvy up, if you like, the capacity of the connectivity with the customer. That opens up many, many possibilities. And we're starting to see the monetization of those services creeping in so that they're not just lab experiments, but they're actually now delivering new paying products into the marketplace. So it's a pretty exciting time to see how the edge matures and actually to see which technology wins out in that space.
Thank you, George. Well, let's hear from our CSP guests on what they are doing and the issues they are facing and how cloud native is helping them. Luke, observations from you first?
Yeah, I think I want to continue to some things that George was saying. I think it's things like all the possibilities that 5G will bring and also Edge will bring that are it's looking fantastic. But also there is we take it step by step, and we're still in the first phase in building that cloud native core, and then to solve some of the more practical question that we touched. But you see that the possibilities, what it comes with, and I think the data analytics, the automation, the building features and so on, that is all great, and we have to really take it step by step to see, okay, how can we really monetize it. And I like to hear that we see some first ideas, because that is going to be really important in a couple of years. Is how that will, what is the business value of it, and how will that work out. I think as we from a technology point of view, we have a lot of possibilities to have like the flexibility in the compute on where we need it. Is it in the center of our network? Is it more towards some distributed points across the network, or it's really the cell edge for mobile, or maybe in your house yourself with some end customers? We need to build up a very flexible system that we can accommodate of everything that we're just dreaming of, that we are finding out now, because we know, like it was in the years before, that maybe we don't see the use cases now, but it will come, and there are some brilliant examples of it with that requires low latency that are really nice. And if you see them and if you use them, then it's great. But we have to see how can we scale that, and how can we also do that in every second of at all place of our network. That's going to be the real challenge for us.
Thanks, Luke. And Jochen, additional thoughts from you here?
Yeah, maybe let me add from Telefonica side. So we are also deeply looking into the topic of edge. How can we leverage what use cases we can enable with that? And I think in the end, it will be a kind of a puzzle game. As Luke mentioned before, it's the same in Telefonica. So one focus area is to build up the 5G core network on cloud environments and cloud solutions. And that's what we are doing right now. On the other hand, we see there's an upcoming demand for private networks from the B2B side, which are demanding private solutions because either of latency or of privacy reasons, or just to replace with a managed connectivity one of their connectivity solutions. So these are the puzzle pieces. On the third aspect, we are looking in what is the edge strategy and the density that we need in order to cover a country like Germany, which is not the hundreds of edge locations that we need in the beginning. So these aspects we are looking in at the moment in order to put them together and to get the complete picture of how should we build up our edge networks. The role of automation of the hyperscalers in that discussion is quite important, because it's obvious that if we have that diverse environments we have to operate on, or that we have to integrate with each other, that it requires more than just manual configuration in order to maintain this. And this kind of fluent integration, orchestration we have heard before, it's really a key aspect that we need to look at, because the vision that we have is that we can deploy our applications independent of the landscape, of the infrastructure landscape that we have below, whereby the infrastructure landscape below will be quite diverse. And I think We heard it also before. Operators usually tend to work with more than just one hyperscaler, with more than one solution in order to deploy on-prem solutions. So that will be quite diverse. And from that perspective, Edge is really exciting journey. I think we are just doing the first baby steps in that. But as we have heard before, it's really important to start now with that in order to explore, to learn, and then to develop the right capabilities. Maybe you've seen that we as Telefonica have just recently announced that we have implemented on our 5G SA public network the first use case in order to demonstrate why low latency could be of relevance. And I think these kind of things are needed in order to teach, to educate, to talk about, and then from that learn what is needed in order to really complement the environment, the landscape, and then being flexible in future of implementing edge solutions, edge-based technologies.
Thank you, Jochen. And Neil, do you have any additional thoughts on distributed edge architectures?
Yeah, look, I think so. I work for a converged operator. We have a massive fixed network as well as a mobile network. We've been moving to distributed for some time because you're talking about bandwidth flows and streams of data that a centralized approach just can't cope with, frankly. So for us, to some extent, this is nothing new. We've been moving to distribution for a while. I think what becomes really important is it's not just about how we operate, it's about how our customers operate. So if you think about it, when we have a network problem today, it's for many folks it's an inconvenience, but as the network becomes more and more part of our lives, and we've seen that over the last year with COVID, when we do have any challenges or we're out of capacity or we need to do something, it's really starting to affect the whole world in ways that we probably only dreamed of a few years ago. And I think that's what's crucially helpful about Edge. It allows us to manage and scale things in a way that's just easier, frankly. It allows us to deploy automation in a way that's easier and more manageable. It allows us to focus on what's important, which is what our customers want and what they need, both in their kind of personal lives, be it for entertainment, be it for at-home type activities, versus our large our enterprise customers that are looking for solutions to make them more effective and more efficient in the marketplace, and for them to sell more and do more. And then in government, where they're trying to empower citizens across the world with kind of e-government type applications, all of those really demand edge. And we haven't mentioned one thing on this, which is kind of return on investment. I'm a bit old fashioned. I like to make money, and predominantly because we need to invest as operators and as cloud platforms. And if we're not making money, it's hard for us to invest. So, how we step forward beyond the infrastructure into providing solutions for our customers is going to determine whether 5G is the success we hoped it would be. I'm very upbeat about it. We've got almost 10 or 20 different use cases in production now. We announced a big one yesterday with the Port of Ipswich, where we're using edge and low latency to help them automate operations. And I think the world looks really exciting in telco for maybe the first time in quite a while. And enterprises are really starting to get involved. But what I'd like to see is more engagement from enterprises and from government, particularly here in Europe. We have to bank the efficiency benefits that 5G enables. It's crucial for Europe, and it's crucial actually across the whole world, as well as more and more demand for services and capabilities come along. So Edge just allows us to do that and allows us to focus on customers.
Great. Thank you very much, Neil. And Atul, how is Nokia with its partner Google Cloud approaching this?
So it's a very topical topic for me personally, Guy, because I remember about 3 years ago I was on a panel and somebody asked me, do you see business case for Edge? And frankly, at that point of time, I didn't have a solid enough answer, because if you look at the numbers, right? So from the customer edge, from the UE to the nearest peering point, the latency, the round trip latency is somewhere between 10 to 15 milliseconds. if you take the latency from that point to the central office, we are talking roughly via CSP network about 20-25 milliseconds. And if you then look at the breakout that happens from the central office into the hosted application somewhere in the cloud, right? So we are talking about public hosted services. It's about 60 to 80 milliseconds. Now with different technologies, you could possibly, if you're using newer technologies, you could probably play with, 10 to 15 millisecond latency, or maybe if you're doing something really great in the CSP network, you can look at that 20 millisecond. But the longest pole here in this entire equation is the 60 to 80 millisecond latency. That's really the longest of the pole. Now the solution for that was obviously to move the application as nearer to the users as possible. But the architecture of the application itself, if you ask 3 years before, was not really cloud native to the truest sense, which means that you had to take the whole or leave it really. So you don't have enough footprint of compute nearer to the customers to move the full application workload all the way near to them to execute and take benefits of these low latency type of scenarios. Now, if you look at the full spectrum of the known use cases today because of the 5G, potentially with 5G SA coming in, we probably can leverage, roughly 30-40% of the use cases. It's only with MEC getting on as an additional capability along with 5G SA that we can actually leverage the full spectrum, the full glory of all the use cases that we can currently think of in a CSP type of a scenario. Because the re-engineered core, along with the capability to deploy bits and pieces of the network on the compute platform scattered all across nearer to the edge, makes it possible, right? And then the slicing technology, which gets matured obviously over a period of time, it gives you that additional guarantee that your applications will perform to the low latency type of demands that you have on the network. So basically with Google Cloud, we've been working quite extensively on a range of solutions, mostly around 5G SA. MEC is certainly something that we have been talking about as well. And by the inherent nature of the 5G architecture itself, I suppose Edge is just going to be a logical extension to all the proof of concepts and the activities that we have been doing with Google. Now that's one point. There's one more point that I was hoping to make, which is the mobile private networks, as Joachim mentioned. Now, Nokia is an undisputed leader in the mobile private networks. Number of implementations, etc. Now, here, if you look at the solution, the enterprises are also embracing, the power of 5G, for example, in automating their own industry verticals, their own setups, etc. Now, Edge is something that plays a part significantly here as well. So we believe that the future obviously is bright. The capability, the time for these use cases is here and now. 3 years ago, maybe it was a great idea whose time had not come. But right now, it seems increasingly like it's a great idea whose time has indeed come.
Thanks, Atul. Margarita, let me turn to you now. How is Google Cloud running Nokia's VNFs and core functions on your Edge portfolio to help CSPs with their 5G and Edge requirements?
Yes, so we in Google, we're working with Nokia, not just on 5G core, but also on the vRAN side. So we are working together to ensure that we have the network functions across these components for 5G networks running on Anthos, and that it can run on-prem, it can run on a public cloud, and we offer the same automation capabilities for lifecycle management, observability in an integrated manner. And this has already been demonstrated to some of the CSPs we are working with together. We're looking with the Nokia at requirements such as latency, timing, footprint, so that we ensure that we can offer solutions to CSPs to deploy these 5G networks in a very distributed manner, so that cell sites, far edge and edge can also be used where you're deploying the 5G network functions. Now, on these edge locations, the idea is that you can also enable edge applications, not only the network functions for 5G, but you can also use the same locations for edge applications. And Google, we have an ecosystem of partners for edge applications and edge use cases. We are integrating their applications on Anthos. So the idea is that you have a platform that you can deploy 5G, and that 5G enables the use of edge applications.
Thank you, Margarita. And before we move on to our audience questions, and we're getting a lot of questions coming in, we'll get to those in just a moment. Let's just quickly hear from our CSP guests first on why they chose to partner with Nokia and Google Cloud and why the industry is moving to cloud native now. Luke, you spoke earlier about the partnership, but why are CSPs making the move to cloud native now? And specifically, what's behind Telnet's strategy?
Well, I think there we're in a very important point in our in the lives of telcos, where we really need to change, and we really need to work and think differently. And I think we work with many vendors, with many hyperscalers and so on, but here we really believe in the power of those two, because they really embrace and they will really want to open and to be open. And that is what we need is to really see, okay, how can we leverage the strengths of each other, and together we can all go in the right direction and be successful in the longer term. And I think it's said a few times with my colleagues over here is in the end we have to see how can we survive and how we can stay at the innovation edge while we have to invest quite a lot. The consumption is only raising. It's 40, 50, 60% per year. So we have to be innovative. We have to do things differently. And I think there as well is we have to really do that up to the infrastructure to work differently, and to also to see how can we really do that together with the partners like here Nokia and Google.
Great, thank you very much, Luke. And Neil, what's behind this cloud native telco movement now? Why now?
I think partially the maturity of the platforms has got to a level where we're feeling more comfortable to deploy them. We've also had to learn a lot. Telecom's engineer is not a cloud engineer, and we need to realize that and respect it. And I think we've got, on both sides of the cloud telco fence, we've got a lot to learn about how each of our crafts are carried out. But ultimately, why now? Actually, the reason why now is our customers are demanding it and they need it. They see the opportunity of the network. They see what the network and network capabilities can bring to their lives, to their businesses. And cloud just gives us a really scalable way of delivering that. Is that the long-term destination? I think uncertain. I think there's still more to see and more to evolve into serverless, and we're already looking at that for a couple of platforms that we have, in particular around TV, where we can simplify the infrastructure even more. But I think the other challenge for us in telco that I'm still not fully convinced we've solved all the issues with is we have a lot of state in the network. And when I mean state, it's things like signaling, it's things like the status of stuff. And, typical IT and virtualization doesn't cope with that so well. And I think probably the next 2 or 3 years, we've got some heavy lifting and some learning to go through. And we've done some simple things with cups and separating signal and control plane with user plane. But I think there's much more to do if we're really to drive forward. So, the capabilities that cloud provides in terms of automation allows us as operators to get stuff moving very quickly, and I think that's appealing for us. But I think we're really at the kind of egg of the evolution in telco cloud and cloud native technologies. And again, as I said earlier, I think it's a super exciting time to be working in this space, because I think we've seen many companies do things with the cloud. I genuinely believe that telcos will do things with their cloud that are more amazing than we could ever dream of. And I think if you're out there looking for a career in cloud technology and the best way of using it, telco's the place to go, because we're really going to stretch the boundaries and what's achievable with cloud technologies. And I think our customers are going to love it.
I think they are too. Thank you very much, Neil. Jochen, final thoughts from you as to why we're moving to cloud native now?
So let me keep the answer short, because a lot of good arguments has been brought to the table. From Telefonica's perspective, the clear point is we have to think different in terms of how do we deploy in order to enable 5G not just being another technology step in implementing connectivity, but really enabling new business. So that's one of the key motivators next to how can we scale flexible, how can we be fast, how can we be also flexible in terms of implementing new features and functionality. The question why we go for Google and Nokia in this environment and piloting, doing the first step, I think it's also on hand. We as Telefonica have a long-lasting partnership with Nokia. They are a part of our core network for really integral components. And we have to continue this journey in terms of there will be a legacy implementation that we still have to maintain for quite some time, while start already doing the first steps into cloud environments. And with Google as a cloud partner, we decided in this area to move with Google because they're really strong in the capabilities they offer and the flexibility. We have heard about the concept of Anthos providing an environment, abstracting also with the infrastructure below. And that's really interesting for us and all this discussion that we had before of how to move from just core applications to edge applications, how to decouple the infrastructure from the software. So there are a lot of good arguments. The right time is now because we have to start rethinking how do we provide connectivity, and it will be in the future a platform game, and cloud will be one of the key enablers for that.
Great. Thank you, Jochen. That's terrific. Thanks, everyone. Time now, though, to hear from the audience. And we are receiving questions coming in every few seconds by the looks of it here. We're getting an awful lot. Let's try and get through as many of them as we can do. So let me move straight on to the first question. And this is from a CSP. Yeah, this is from a CSP in the EMEA region. The question is, how will Nokia and Google work together to build 5G use cases? And how will this framework actually add value to CSPs? So let me ask Atul and Margarita first. Atul, perhaps you first. How are you collaborating on use cases?
Yeah, so 5G, as we all know, opens up the possibilities to basically expose their capabilities via NEF function, which is the network exposure function, as we all know. And this kind of allows the 5G core to be opened up for the third-party developers to come in and basically use those APIs to create applications which are not usually available in the earlier Gs of the evolution cycle. So one of the things that Nokia is doing with our 5G re-engineered standalone core is to focus a lot on the ecosystem and the APIs which are getting enabled by the network exposure function. And we've done quite a few POCs by exposing the NEF or hosting the NEF via Google Cloud's ecosystem. And the developers, if you see, right, so quite a few of them, they're quite familiar with the tool sets that Google currently have. And it seems like the natural way to expose the capabilities to try out creation of some of the newer use cases that we would have probably not thought. So that's one angle. The other angle is also the capability to re-engineer our application to kind of host them as a SaaS function. So if you look at the consumption cycle for a lot of CSPs, right? So, and if anybody were to do like an assessment of their balance sheets for the last 3 years, you'll see that the capex has been significantly or not significantly, continuously kind of going down, whereas the OPEX has been going up steadily. And which means that the consumption models have been changing a bit, at least for some of the applications. If they can be hosted or offered up as a SaaS service, I suppose there is an opportunity to do so. And I suppose the CSPs are getting increasingly open to look at those kind of avenues. So we are trying to look at different avenues of how we can open up the ecosystem, how we can work with Google to then enable CSPs to open up their ecosystems to developers for creating some of the newer use cases. So that's something I can think of right now.
Great, thank you for that. And Margarita, would you like to add anything to that answer? Perhaps on the second part of the question, where the questioner is asking about how can this framework add value to CSPs?
Sure. So we have been working with, for example, Telefonica Germany and Nokia. We did look at the network exposure function and how we could bring new partners into the solution to offer these type of services. And we're also looking at 5G private networks, and it's the enterprises that the CSPs provide services to, where that they are looking at use cases, and then together we come up with solutions where the applications require run on the Google Cloud, and the CSPs have this type of offerings to their customers.
Thank you very much for that. Next question we've got in, which is from an operator in Eastern Europe. The question is to the CSPs on the panel. Could our CSPs share a bit more detail about which telco applications or workloads they've already moved to public clouds and how they interact with applications that are still on-prem? Any one of our CSPs maybe like to tackle that one? Or Neil, thank you.
I think move's probably the wrong word, Guy. I think if you're moving workloads, and maybe it's the term, it's probably not the right approach. So what we did was we recreated, if you will, our TV platform in the public cloud. So all of BT TV and BT Sport runs from the public cloud. And I think the mindset of moving workloads, in my experience, doesn't really work very well. You end up with a lot of cost, huge complexity, and you end up kind of re-architecting lots of things after the fact. So we really try to look at it as how do we build the use case or the workload in a cloud native way, because we get much better results. But we're also running a number of other things in the public cloud on voice, in data and data analytics, and also partnering with other application providers who are running out of the public cloud as well, that are delivering services on our network.
Great, thanks for that, Neil. And also this question about moving and duplicating and rebuilding. Do any of our other CSPs want to respond to that one about specific workloads? Jochen, please.
Yeah, let me from Telefonica Germany side add to this. So we have done quite a lot of POCs in order to implement the 5G core network functions from different areas. So from the packet core side, application side, as well as register functions and things like that. In order to move into real commercial use for this one, there are some steps that we have to do in order to comply with data protection. So that's what we are working on right now. In the kind of applications that are less critical from a data protection point of view, we have made already the steps, like we have heard before from BT side. So there are analytics reporting stuff in, which is less critical from a customer data perspective. So it's a kind of journey that we have in front of us. The clear ambition is to start building all the new stuff for the 5G components or for the 5G network in the public cloud. And there are some good moves that we are doing right now in order to prepare this, also for charging solutions. So quite a good track record that we have in that.
Great, thank you very much for that, Jochen. I think really I'd like to get on to another question, unless there's anybody or other guests want to respond to this one. I'd like to move on to another question because I've got quite a few in. In that case, let me read this one out for you all. This one's just come in. And it's about integration. What are the main integration challenges faced with open software stacks, and which have been the most surprising? Do the benefits of open stacks outweigh the cost of having to integrate the solutions? Now, is anybody able to help our viewer out with this particular question on integration? Neil, thanks.
Yeah, I mean, I think, first of all, it depends what you're doing. But I wouldn't underestimate some of the challenges in that integration. And actually, it's one of the things why we were excited about Google Anthos, because in every telco cloud and every public cloud, everything's slightly different. And when you're bringing a myriad of different applications together, so Jochen talked about 5G core. 5G core is something like, 30 or 40 different types of workloads. And sometimes 5G core can be 2 or 3 vendors. We have 3 vendors in our 5G core, and you're trying to integrate all of those capabilities together, as well as integrate into the tooling and the capabilities of your cloud, either private or public. And it's very challenging. So in my mind, having a really strong skill base, paying top dollar for your cloud engineers, because they are crucially important. And then recognizing that you're probably going to have to build, some sort of lab to really test everything end to end. We found that the earlier we start lab work and the proof of concepts, the quicker we actually get out there. Particularly in complex solutions where you've got multiple different suppliers or different parts of open source talking to each other. But let's also be realistic. We talk a lot about open source, and the reality is it's all Linux, it's all Kubernetes, and when you look at it like that, it starts to get a lot simpler. We have some vendors say, oh well, we're only going to run on Red Hat, which what is Red Hat? It's Linux, and we found that actually stuff that only runs on Red Hat actually runs on Canonical pretty well too. So I think the big thing is be sure about what you're doing, figure out how you're going to test it, and then make sure you've got the right skills and capabilities and partnerships to test it, and then look at things like Google Anthos, where and this is one of the things actually I encouraged Nokia to work with Google Anthos. Is a guy who used to work at Nokia called Basil Alwyn. He's somewhat famous, and I said to him, I think 2019, that you should put all your software on Google Anthos because it will make it much easier for CSPs to deploy it. And I think that's turning out to be true. And we see other cloud operators trying to catch up with what Google Anthos has achieved. And part of that is that pre-integration. If you know that Google Anthos is shaped in this way, you can pre-integrate to it and make it really easy to deploy. So, my sense is be certain about what you're trying to achieve and really think about the testing regime, because that's where you find things that you just would never expect to find.
Thank you very much, Neil. We've got a related question to that, but first I want to come on to Luke. Luke.
No, I think I fully agree, of course, and it's really important for I think to be successful in the longer run is that we can make things simple and that we don't make it too complex, but that we really simplify and do actively work on keeping those things simpler. And that's why we really encourage, and you see it that Google and Nokia, that they really are deeply integrated. That's a good thing. But then you see with the ecosystem of an operator where of course there is a lot of different interfaces. Also there is we have to see that step by step we don't have to reinvent always all the things, and we have to sometimes to agree with that we don't have 100% of full all features and visibility and all of all those tools and so on, but that we can live with 95, 96, 97 in order to just reduce the complexity. And that's because in the end it will be so complex. So that's why also here it is important that a big part, a big chunk is managed, and that is taking care with partners like Google and like Nokia, that they at least for that part it's as future proof as possible.
Thank you very much, Luke. Let me get onto this next question now, if I can. It's a long question, so please bear with me. All CSPs have different ways of onboarding 5G nodes. Some AWS, some Google, some Azure, some private. Vendors have to be able to work with all of them, and each one has different integration and onboarding challenges. Therefore, are there too many options that have to be supported by technology suppliers such as Nokia? Anyone want to look at this? Do we need some drastic simplification in our ecosystem here? George?
Yeah, I'll pick this one up because I think this is exactly this problem space that we faced in the IT world 8 or 10 years ago, where every vendor had their own bespoke interface into the activation, configuration, and management of their component. And we're seeing that in the network space. And as the network is becoming software, what you're actually seeing then is that unlocks the capabilities and the functionality of the components, which were previously hardware components that took 12 to 18 months to define and design, and then they were a locked set of features that you bought in your network component. Now, as it's software, it's this opportunity to make changes to it is available. But the problem is, to make changes to it, you need a management interface. And everybody has built their own management interface, and it's slightly different, and therefore the complexity that is evolving in this space is enormous. Added to that the fact you're also trying to remove people from the equation, so you're trying to add automation and add intelligence to these components by adding machine learning or AI-based algorithms to drive the decisions that are being made, so that you can reconfigure the component in real time. It's just becoming, a real rat's nest of interfaces, of protocols, of management, and it needs some form of open standards so that they are shared across the industry, that they simplify the management of the domains, and then within the domains, the components to make up the functionality of those domains, to actually allow us to get to the stage of being able to unlock the business capabilities and the technology that's going to be delivered to the customers. And I think that's one of the things that will really change this space. As cloud native networks actually takes off, if we can get the standard interfaces to manage it through a set of industry standard open APIs, then I think we have a chance of being able to manage the complexity that is appearing before our very eyes over the last 18 months.
Thank you very much, George. We have a problem. We need to fix it. Margarita, I'm going to come to you in a minute, but I believe Neil just wanted a word as well on this topic.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of hear what George is saying. I'm not sure I fully agree. I think, listen, first of all, I rebuilt most of the network in the UK, and I was waiting 2 years for the IT to catch up. In fact, it frustrated me so much, I started becoming an IT expert, or tried to at least. I think the challenge we face here is how do you differentiate? If we're all running open source with standard interfaces, with standard stuff, then we're all going to look the same. And actually, we're the number one network in the UK, and the reason we have that is because our tooling is better than everybody else's. So I don't want to be overly standardized. I want to be able to differentiate. And in a market where we're really saturated, competition's challenging, if I can't go out and build things to make our network run and perform better, well, actually, I'm going to do it, whether there's a standard or not. And I think that's what we need to be careful about. I think there are ways that we can develop things that make things easier for us, for sure. But I think this kind of open everything, open standards, to me, feels like, we'll just become, it's just like pressing the gas pedal on becoming the dumb pipe provider. And I've got absolutely no intention of doing that. And frankly, my customers do not want us to do that. They want us to know instantly that there's an issue in the network, and for us to be doing something about it. So I kind of think that, yes, we don't need any more complexity, but I go back to my earlier point. Everything's Linux, everything's Kubernetes, all this stuff's pretty much the same. Unless you're completely mad, it's, trying to integrate it is not that difficult. It's time consuming. You need to test a lot. But it's ultimately the same stuff at the end of the day. And if we make it too simple, then what value are we bringing? I want to be able to be certain that that 999 call that one of our customers placed gets through, and more importantly, on the emergency network side, that the ambulance that's rolling towards saving their lives has definitely happened, is definitely moving. And then for the video game player, I want to make sure he's the world champion, because our network enabled him to be world champion, because I have built the best tooling with the things that I need to be the best. So it's an interesting kind of balance point. Do you standardize everything and everyone's the same, or do you try and build some competitive advantage? And I would say, well, at least what we're doing here in the UK, the competitive advantage is working for us, because we're number one. We're picking up loads of customers. Our 5G network is more available in more places than anyone else's in the UK, and that's because of the tooling and the kind of build solutions that we've come up with, without kind of just following the kind of standard out of the box.
Fantastic. Thank you, Neil. And Margarita, let me come to you now for your views on this question.
Yes, thank you. No, I wanted to share how pleasantly surprised I was on how fast it was working with Nokia for us to integrate the automation of building the Antus clusters together, the 5G core components, so solutions teams working together and quickly putting the automation together. And also in terms of how easy it was to take on metrics and logs from Nokia 5G core, exposing it to dashboards on Google, and also then having one of our Google data scientists looking at the data and creating models for fault analysis. So pretty surprising, but in a good sense.
That's good to hear. Thanks, Margarita. Atul, let me come to you because I think we are approaching the end of our program and I don't think we're going to be able to get another question in. So let me come to you for a response on this question.
Thanks, Guy. So, yeah, I mean, quite a few things have been said. So what I can say is as a vendor, obviously there are at least top 3 or top 4 or top 5 ecosystems on which we want to, make our applications interop and work. Fortunately, there is an element of standardization that indeed comes in from the 3GPP side of the house, which means that there are certain things that that are in our control in terms of how we want to architect our software. Now, obviously, when it comes to the onboarding on these cloud providers, there are subtle differentiating factors, yes. But I believe, from a CSP point of view, right? I suppose the differentiation could potentially come in at the point of engagement with the customers, potentially slightly higher up in the stack. But when it comes to the network, I suppose 3GPP I think is a good enough benchmark that we have at hand to make our applications available on any cloud platform, which also happens to be the Nokia strategy at the moment.
Thank you very much, Atul. Unless there's any other quick comments on this particular viewer question, I think we're going to have to wrap up this show there. Okay, I think that is it. We have reached the end of the program. Great discussion there at the end, and so many questions that we haven't quite got to, but we will look at those later. No more time for any more questions. It's been a great discussion. I'd like to thank all of our guests for participating and sharing their views today. Thank you, everyone. And if you'd like to get more information on this subject, why cloud native and why now, and to find out more about the Nokia and Google Cloud partnership, you'll find various links on the dedicated virtual event webpage. For now, though, thank you very much for watching and goodbye.